Does that present overwhelming obstacles as we try and make progress? Is this like tackling Goliath? And is that slowing down our ability to make progress?
But I'm going, who created the Goliath, right? Who created it? I think that's the problem. We talk about Goliath. We should create Davids, right? In a sense that, or I mean, everybody talks about we need unicorns. We don't need unicorns. We need zebras. The fact is, today, let's take the example of dental chair. Simple dental chair. A dental chair, people overcomplicate it, make it 25 features. It guzzles more power. When I design solar for a sewing machine, people say solar is expensive, but nobody says the sewing machine is inefficiently designed. The best friend of inefficiency is the grid. And so you say, oh, we need the grid because you need to power sewing machine, but nobody actually says the sewing machine was inefficient. Now, a dental chair has 20 features, classic, everything. It needs to be in an air-conditioned place. You put it in a large hospital, you monopolize the health service. Even if you give free dental service for the poor has to travel 2 days, waste his time or her time, and then it's very expensive for the poor to go there. Just give me a dental chair, which is DC powered, with 4 features. I will deliver dental services right at the doorstep of the poor, democratizing, using solar energy. Because it's 25 features, you purposely make it more expensive and unaffordable for the poor. The beauty of sustainable energy is forces us to look at efficiency, democratization at the doorstep. So so unfortunately we look at solar power, oil, gas. Can we look at the appliances? The what is needed? Can I have a better efficient designed house? And that can actually democratize. So that can be done. It's not unnecessarily the focus is on energy, but not on the other parts of the system. And that's why in the next 20 years, if GE starts making better equipment, more efficient, if the education manufacturers start making better, if you start teaching that in schools of how do you look at efficiency and design from a consumptive methodology, asking the students to rely less on Excel sheets, but on empathy to look at solutions, we will actually reach it in 20 years.
I love your concept of the Davids. So, who and where are the Davids? Are we the Davids? How do you see in your mind who the Davids are, and where are they?
We have a bias. Who gets the money? PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. Vernacular crowd, which does not speak English. I'm not against English language, but does not the way we use language, poor as beneficiaries. Poor are partners. If you look at the 4 billion people, if we belong to the 1 billion people, why don't we ever consider that there are going to be Einsteins in that 4 billion people, Aristotles in that group, Ramanujans in the sense? But for that, we need to create that level playing field, and we use sustainable energy to make sure there's an Einstein that comes from the bottom of the funnel. Because we confuse between intellectual poverty and financial poverty. And moment we break that, those are where the Davids are. We unnecessarily create the Goliath, and that's the Davids are.
Okay, that's a great setting. So, Cesar, how would you respond to this? What thoughts do you have as
I agree completely. I mean, first of all, as you rightfully said, the price of the oil is not fully reflective of the externalities. And that's why Shell, for example, is actively participating in carbon pricing discussions in Europe to encourage the prices on CO2. Because that is something that would help lower the consumption of hydrocarbon with higher CO2 content. Okay, so we're actively participating in that one. And then similarly, what you said, it has to be an interactive process because we focus a lot on the supply side, but actually, as you said, the demand side is an equally important consideration in this whole discussion. Because at the end of the day, it is the consumption of energy that actually creates CO2. So it is something that needs to be worked together on the supply and demand side. And as I've said, it's just at this stage that there are some other aspects of industry that we need some more work on. But I agree with you, it does not and should not prevent us from doing something that we could readily address today. right? And yeah, renewables, as we democratize it, is a classic example of where we could definitely make a big jump and a big dent. However, the slight concern, and I'm not saying we should not do anything today, because we should, right? Slight concern is some of the analysis that we have been doing shows that at a certain point in time, you still need a fair bit of more aggressive CO2 capturing mechanism to allow us to come up with a net CO2 negative world. Okay, I mean, by all means, we need to do whatever we need to do. But a good example of that is carbon capture and storage. Okay, that's a technology that needs to be commercialized so that where we still need to use some hydrocarbons moving forward, we will be able to capture and store the CO2 instead of releasing it to the ground, releasing to the atmosphere. The other equally important aspect is most basic. I was when the slide of the Angat Dam was shown, I was telling Harish, it broke my heart to see the amount of deforestation surrounding me. And forests are natural CO2 sinks. And if we continue the deforestation, it compounds the problem of not being able to cap our CO2 discharge. Because at the moment, because of the increased use of energy, to be able to provide convenience to and better quality of life to the rest of the population, the energy mix needs to change. We need to introduce significantly more renewables, and then over and above that, we need to find ways to really capture the other residual CO2 that the system is generating. Okay? That one working hand in hand with demand is something that is what we need to be able to address the dilemma that I shared earlier, which is how do we provide cleaner and more accessible energy for everybody in a manner that is responsible and sustainable for our planet.
So, thank you. Yeah. So, oil companies aren't particularly loved these days. I wonder if you could help us understand, how does Shell, first of all, what business does Shell think it's in? And secondly, how have the scenario planning helped you begin to tackle some of the issues that Harish has been talking about?
Thanks for that, Brad. Yes, thank you for the question, because we are actually an energy company. Okay, we have just recently launched in 2016 our new energies business, which focuses a lot on renewables and electricity. So actually, we want 4 big legs in our business moving forward. That's oil, gas, chemicals, and renewables. So it is something that we have really been grappling with, and something that we want to be able to contribute a solution to, as opposed to be a cause of a problem. And some of you may know we have completely gotten out of coal. Just recently, we've sold our oil sands business. With the acquisition of BG, we are now, our portfolio is 50% into LNG. And why are we excited on LNG? Because LNG produces 50% less CO2 and 1/10 less of the externalities that you were producing. So these are some of the stuff that the more we could deploy these things, the more we could deploy some of the technologies that are existing. For example, carbon capture and storage is some of the stuff that would help pave the way towards that greater access for energy. Now, scenario planning, as I've said, something we've used for almost 40 years now, and we've through that scenario planning that makes us hopeful that indeed there will be a plausible solution to this dilemma that we are seeing. And as I've said, I haven't digested the material yet. We just published a new report called Shell Transition Report. There is a plausible scenario that by 2070 we will have a net CO2 zero net CO2 emission by 2070. Okay? It's not going to be easy, but there's a plausible pathway towards achieving that.
So Harish, do you see a way by which you can work with big oil, for example? Because we really live in very different worlds, which is true of a lot of the problems we talk about today. Is that we're very siloed in terms of looking to achieve the same ways, but coming at it very differently. What interaction Do you have any, or do you see, do you have a scenario where you can start to see some different alternatives?
I mean, we need to see who takes the, I mean, I want to set up the stage here. Let's look at this country, Philippines, which is day by day getting hit by typhoons on a more regular basis. And now what happens is, when we say that it affects the poor a lot, right? The climate change affects the poor. But we are making that a very blanket statement in a very naive way. If you look at the level of poverty, if I draw the level of poverty as this, right? And we are like 10 rungs up. Even if it affects us, we couple of rungs, we come down. But what happens to the poor is they go 4 rungs down. That means 2 more generations of their kids will be under poverty because the typhoon hit. It's not one. It's not like it's going to come back in 1 year. They go from poor to ultra poor. It's not poor. So we confuse, and the poor is of poor, very poor, and abject poverty. And so when the poor get affected by climate change, they go into abject poverty. It takes 2 more generations to do that. I hope we realize that, because for us, it's not about environment. It's also about social justice and social unsustainability. The kids with the aspirations for the future will go take a different path that's not socially sustainable for the society. And for us, I think we all need to look at that urgency. We have to realize that we are responsible for that climate change, right? And I hope we all have to work together to say that we don't have the time and we don't feel the pressure, unfortunately, because we are not facing the brunt actually. We are very good in talking and speaking about it, but we are not doing. So I would put the oil companies on a spot. What are you doing for the 3 billion people that is inclusive? What are you doing today that is inclusive? I don't care what you individually do as, I've converted this, we have sold that. No, I cannot take that for granted. Because today, what your actions in the next 10 years, that the 1.6 billion people get out of poverty, exact answers are not only, Shell, but all the oil companies and all the governments per se. And answerable, like, what are the definite steps that will help us?
I hope you're formulating some good responses and questions out there, because this is a rich discussion going on up here. So, when we look at this issue, there are basically 3 actors: government, private sector business, and civil society. Those are the 3 actors that are going to determine this. How do you see the decision-making, the leadership in each of these sectors? You represent two of the 3 sectors. And where do you see this going? Who should we be looking towards to provide the leadership? You could say all of them, of course. But where do you see the strength coming from each of those sectors, or the weaknesses?
So now I see leadership, if I look at Philippines, India, I see leadership in the early graduates of engineering schools and management and the other sectors, the anthropologists. So we are concentrating on those, because they're going to be, I have lost hope on our generation, because they only talk about it, we will do it, but tomorrow, Monday morning, the Excel sheet, my growth, this growth, that growth. So we start looking at this 10th, 11th, 12th grade engineering schools, so that we don't spoil them as soon as they join the big 4, the big 8 and the big 12. And start looking at sustainability thought process there itself. Why social, environmental sustainability is more critical than financial sustainability, because unfortunately we compare financial sustainability and environmental sustainability. I think these are time lags. Today, social unsustainability is going to hit your financial sustainability in 5 years. So we have to look at how do we teach the younger kids to be more inclusive in their thought process when they design, whether it's a house or a business model. Inclusive in terms of, you and me did a PhD. If you and me did a PhD on sugarcane, we'll be called experts of sugarcane. A farmer doing 45 years of sugarcane will not be called an expert, but he has to listen to us because we had a PhD. So, and because we had time to do PhD, they didn't have the time to do PhD. Right, so whenever somebody calls me Dr. Hande, I think because I wasted my 5 years, you're calling respecting me. When I had, so So the question is that inclusivity is what we need to bring in. And that is where I feel the champions are going to come from the present younger generation, who are going to change the way, the processes, the companies, the business models, and the financial.
So do you see government as sort of either a bystander or getting in the way?
We are the government, so we can always complain. We voted people in, so let's not complain. If we have, see, for us, I'm not an activist. Because for me, the best form of protest is by providing solutions. Shall I go to the government and say, boss, I have done it for 20 years. Now these are solutions which I have failed or succeeded. That's why I tell the youngsters, use solutions as the best form of protest. And also, don't use government as an excuse. Because sometimes when you don't want to do it, the government didn't allow me. Tell me, where did the government didn't allow you? I think for the youngsters is, you are the government, you're part of the government, create solutions in the rural areas, and then say, because there are bureaucrats who say, Harish, I am only 2 years, give me a solution, I'll do it. And there are human beings in the government. So I don't think the government is a barrier.
Well, of course, I'm coming from the United States, whose president is basically a climate denier. And yet it's been very interesting to see what's happened, almost to your point, I think, that the energy now, because of that, is from the bottom. A lot mobilized. Individual states are saying, you can pull out of the Paris Agreement, but we're going to join it. We're going to meet those goals. So there's a lot of hope from the bottom. In fact, one could argue that's where the hope is. But what do you think if you look at these three sectors?
No, indeed, it has to be a tripartite collaborative agreement. It should not detract anybody, any segment, from doing what it can. And again, as in Shell, being part of one of the segments, we contribute a lot to the discussion, and including deployment of whatever known technology we may have. In terms of just your question about what are we doing more directly, so as some of you may know, we are embarking on our access to energy. We've already embarked on our several access to energy programs. We have 3 microgrids that are in operation now, and we're trying to learn how we could scale this up and how we could do this in a manner that's sustainable both economically, commercially, and also environmentally. So we have 3 at the moment that are in operation. We are actually on a more micro basis even. We've introduced a program called Liter of Light. Some of you may be familiar with the program where we use PET bottles. We use our service stations as collecting points for PET bottles, and we work with a foundation that converts solar panel lights out of solar bottles. And that, I think, is a classic example of what you were talking about democratizing it. Because through the use of the solar-powered lights using PET bottles, a community was lighted. Okay, so we need to be able to do more of these. So these are some of the stuff that I think both on a macro, bigger scale, and micro level, industry must be taking a lead on and then doing whatever it can. So it has to be the three-way collaboration. And your point about government, I will not make any comment. We are supposed to be neutral, so we are. I can only comment on behalf of what the industry should do.